Ladies and gentlemen, you're very welcome back to week 3 of Solas Sessions, and thank you so much for tuning in for the last few weeks. So just sit back, relax, and enjoy Solas Sessions.
Weeks of gathering would finally bring its reward as a huge pile was lit on bonfire night. The flames created long shadows as we sat around, our faces black with the smoke that reached into the night sky and could be seen for miles around. Our not very environmentally friendly fire hissed and spat evidence of the variety of stuff it contained. Maggie Ferris's old mattress fizzled as the flames caught it, and Ned Gibbons' rickety old table groaned in protest as the flames licked around its legs. An old tin beans or peas somehow made its way onto the fire, and everyone jumped when it exploded. All the village used the bonfire as an excuse to have a good clear out. Elegant shoes from American parcels rubbed heels with worn-out Wellingtons and hobnail boots as they made their final journey heavenwards. Old papers sent their news sparkling into the June sky. Our mothers made buns and cakes which we downed with mugs of orange squash and coca. This was in the days before Coke and crisps, and when a hot dog was what Spot got too close to the fire and the sparks caught his tail. As the night wore on, the fire died and old tyres were thrown on, and our mothers rushed to take the clothes off the washing line before they got ruined by thick black smoke. Tom Staunton would arrive with his accordion, and the adults would dance around the fire as the children sat back and enjoyed the music. It was the adults' night now. As it grew chilly, someone would produce a bottle of Powers, and it would be passed around in a chipped old mugs. And soon someone would start a song, and we would all join in the chorus. As the night wore on, our eyes would close with tiredness and the heat of the fire. Our parents would carry us home to our beds, the music wafting along behind us. On our way to school the next morning, the fire would still be smoking, but its magic and mystery would be gone as it waited for the shower to take it out, until St. John's night came around again.
Margaret was a beautiful lady. Her hair was as black as a raven. Her eyes were the colour of the ocean, and her skin was as white as snow. She was a daughter, sister, wife, grandmother, neighbour, friend, and my dear mother. She has left a legacy of her love, the way she touched our lives. Margaret was born in Dundalk, and from an early age she loved the Gaelic language. After leaving boarding school, she attended St. Patrick's University, where she met Brian. They were married when she was 25, and a year later, I was born. Each year, we travelled around the world, where my mother insisted that I try local food and learn the native language. Margaret was healthy. She never smoked or drank, only ate organic produce, and she always took pride in her appearance. Margaret always wore makeup, and her hair was always done so nicely. She loved to wear the latest fashion and big hats on special occasions. It pains me to think of how she would have viewed herself of late. She taught in Loretto's Dalkey until she had to take early retirement due to ill health. When Mum was first diagnosed with Alzheimer's, we had no idea what it was. Then as time went by and the disease progressed, it became clear that she would not be fine in a few weeks or months. It's hard to understand the magnitude of Alzheimer's disease unless someone close to you has it. First, she'd forget how to drive home or repeat herself during a conversation. But that was just the beginning of things, as she would soon forget the very basic things in life, the things we take for granted. Margaret had this habit of packing up all of her belongings into little plastic bags. At first, I was not quite sure why she did it, but I guess she thought she was in another time and place to the present. It amazed me how she managed to pack seemingly random items into each tiny plastic bag. She would put rosary beads in her socks, combs in her black heels, and a crayon inside her jewellery box. I don't want to concentrate on the grueling stages of Alzheimer's as I watched my mother deteriorate, because I would like her to be remembered for who she really was before the illness took her, when her heart was full of spirit. To me, Mum is the songs she used to sing as she cooked the dinner, the places she travelled to, her infectious smile, the books she read that made her question everything, the photos she captured, and the people that she loved, the values that meant so much to her and the future she dreamed of. I realised how precious my time with Mum was. I only had moments with her, which were a combination of loving connection and moments of shock, when Mum would enter almost another world in another time, and I watched her helplessly, unable to bring her back to the present. I wanted to know everything about her, so when the opportunity arose, I asked her all about her childhood, her stories, especially the innocent ones about going to dances in Blackrock. I wrote down her famous treacle cake recipe, her words of wisdom, and her favourite Gaelic sayings, such as Val o Ia Earth. I drew our family tree and wrote down the stories about each relation. I was my mother's caregiver, and we were both trapped in a world of Alzheimer's, with its heartache, its emptiness, and hopelessness. Depending on the day, hour, or minute, I was her Aunt Judy. Even though she was dead for many years, I found my best response when she saw me as someone else was not to contradict her, causing her more agitation, but rather just assume the assigned role and respond to her as that person, answering her questions and enjoying our conversation. Before she died, I asked her what was her favourite season. She loved autumn because it reminded her of her childhood, where she would sat at the bay window watching the leaves change colour and fall gracefully to the ground. So when I miss you, Mum, all I have to do is look out of my bay window at the chestnut tree as the leaves descend, and I'll know you are watching over me. I will miss you always, but I know you are at peace now, and you will live on through me and my children, in your words, in your actions, and in the values you taught me.
No one ever asked me how I felt, what it felt like to lose every facet of my existence to such a debilitating disease. It started off slowly, forgetting where I put everyday objects, but I put it down to stress. But when I started forgetting directions to familiar places and forgetting a word mid-sentence, I knew then that I had to seek medical help. It was a crisp autumn day, and I was sitting in the neurologist's office when she told me I had early onset of Alzheimer's. Part of me died that day, for I knew what lay ahead for my family and for myself. I tried to act normal, put on a brave face, laugh it off when I did stupid things like putting shampoo in the fridge. But inside, I felt so ashamed. I knew I was regressing fast when I had to give up my teaching job and driving the following winter. Each day I was terrified because I was losing part of myself every day, and I had no control. At times, I got so angry with Sarah because I didn't remember that she was my daughter. And I hated the fact that she had to do every basic thing for me, like tying my shoes. I felt like a child. By the following spring, I had lost my train of thought and I was put in a nursing home. When a person hears Alzheimer's, they assume that you lose your memory. But I lost every part of myself. I lost my personality. I lost my sense of humor. I lost every skill I had. And my judgment became totally impaired. But worst of all, I stopped learning. I'd stand there crying, frustrated, with not knowing my trousers were inside out or back to front. I just didn't know what to do with the clothes in my hand. I'd spend the day sitting, staring, trying to figure out where I was. I felt like so alone, like a child in a woman's body, being spoon-fed and wearing incontinence pads as my memory slipped away, as my dignity slipped away. I had good days when I could function and days when I couldn't remember a loved one's name. I had days when I could hold a conversation and days when I would forget a word or a loved one's name. There were days when I could live in the present, and days when I was on a different universal plane, switching from past to present. Times when I was at peace, living in my own world, and times when I was terrified, afraid of what I would lose next. Right, class, take out your books and turn to page 78. Today we are going to learn about the Irish famine. Then I am transported back to when I was 5 years old in Dundalk, and my sister is teasing me about my fringe. Then I am sitting talking to my granddaughter and telling her the recession is over now and she should come back and retire. Then I am catapulted into the present and a lady is coming close to me, combing my hair. I shout, "Who are you and where am I?" She says she is my daughter, but I don't have a daughter. I'm still at boarding school, and the nuns will send me to the laundry if I have got out the window and got pregnant. I lost all pleasant memories of people and places. My first day at school, my best friends Sarah and Aisling, my first paycheck, my first love, passing my driving test, graduating from university, my wedding day, the birth of my child, the arrival of my granddaughter. My life was slipping away from me. And memories would come like I would listen to a song or I would feel something in my apron pocket. And these memories were like a butterfly dancing in the sky, and I would reach out to catch it. And I thought I did. But when I opened it, the butterfly was gone. The next time you dress yourself and find something to wear, just be glad you know how to put it on and where it goes. The next time you enjoy a warm bath, appreciate the fact that you can get out of the tub yourself in private. The next time someone asks you to help with the dishes, be grateful you know what to do with the soap. Remember the good times you've had with your friends and your loved ones. Enjoy the next book you read and appreciate the fact that you can remember it in 2 days' time. Be thankful for all that you have experienced in your life, both good and bad. Don't pass up on the opportunity to visit and laugh with loved ones, because there might come a time when you no longer can.
Literature. And when all is done, I'll come back as beach sand, preferably on a strand in Roundstone or Fanor in October, when the sky is as blank as a page. I'll write on myself with a juniper branch, then wake to find the words gone, the pulp of my skin as oily as yesterday. Today I lay and watched the world, I'll scribble, was trod on by a stray dog, felt the curling of lugworms in my cheek until the day grows black with ink and throws me into the fire of the sea. I like to think of the branch, that most virtuous of quills, waiting obediently to itch my face with words. Lifetimes will pass, and I'll still be part of the freshness of each day, waiting for thumb notes. Ellie was here, a scratched love heart, still be open to young lovers and the commas of their souls on an evening stroll through the endless literature of the earth.
I'm not a great one for remembering things. I don't mean like I forget people's names or what I want in the supermarket. Though I do that too. Maybe it would be better to say I'm not a great one for reminiscing. You know, when you have a few spare moments and you let your mind wander off somewhere. You know, right before you fall asleep or when you're on a bus or at mass or something. I don't go back and replay the VHS tapes in my skull. I just find it too depressing. Don't get me wrong. There's nothing all that distressing in those back catalogues. It'd be largely rated PG, but even the really happy memories make me sad sometimes. You know? 'Cause they're over. That perfect occurrence has been and gone, and what made it so great can't be redone. Well, that makes me a little sad. Granny was the complete opposite. She always seemed to me like someone who had lived out their allocation of joy, and all that was left was mundane at best. At times, she was misery personified, sitting at the kitchen table saying that the day was awful long and complaining that her only child, my father, was only concerned with booking his next holiday, and would he not be right to wait till she died before he went abroad? Her people would never leave her alone to go gallivanting on foreign holidays. My siblings and I, her adult grandchildren, didn't fall into the category of her people. Her people all came from the parish of Tuberbreda. And she changed completely when she spoke of them. Her face looked younger somehow, her movements more fluid, and she was talking about her time working as a manageress in a grocery cum drapery cum bar in Athlone. You know, she was the only person who could talk about the emergency and rations with sheer delight. You know, you could only have a few ounces of tea and sugar a week in them days, and I'd have to weigh it out in the shop. And if I was caught handing out more than I should, there'd be blue mortar. They were great days. In fairness, Granny lived into her mid-90s. And she'd outlived her family and friends and neighbours by decades. The past was full of people she loved, and she smiled when she spoke of them. But the sadness of good times been and gone would make her eyes glisten. Do you think God has forgotten me? She asked me that once after one of these memory talks. Well, not at all, Granny. And when I do die, do you think will I see all those people again? You will, of course, Granny, I told her. And what's more, they'll all be standing at the gates of heaven waiting for you. And do you know what they'll say when you get there? What? She said. She was looking at me so intently. They'll say, what in the name of God kept you till now? And she rasped out her silent laugh, top and bottom lip disappearing inside her mouth, filling the space where her teeth used to be, and her shoulders bouncing up and down rhythmically, in total silence. You know, from then on, our conversations moved from her past to her future. But being 96, she really only had one big upcoming life event that she could really look forward to. Her funeral. And in talking about grave diggers and undertakers and coffin styles and hymns, she had a lightness about her, like a young woman planning her wedding. And as for flowers, she announced, I'll have none at all. None of them. No wreaths or displays or any of that nonsense. Now, this was something I heartily protested against. Granny, I said, sure, you'd have to have some flowers. I mean, people would think we were the most miserly lot that we didn't get you so much as a wreath or a nice display for the top of the coffin. She paused for a moment, considered this, and after a long while she said, you know, you might be right. Her eyes widened, her smile broadened. I'll have one single white rose clasped between my fingers and the rosary beads intertwined. Oh, wouldn't that be lovely? And no matter how much I argued in favour of the concept of, family flowers only, no, she wouldn't budge. One single white rose. And then, just like that, out of the blue, the call came that Granny had died. And for all the talk of death and funerals, it was a shock. But it wasn't a surprise. And I knew exactly what it was she wanted. So did my father. So did my siblings. The problem was that nobody else knew about the dream of the dramatic single white rose. And I was still concerned about cousins and neighbours commenting on our thrifty use of the funeral budget, when it came to wreaths and sprays. What's more, Granny died a few days before Valentine's Day. So every shop and petrol station in the country was packed to the rafters with flowers. So I decided to go down to the local super value and pick up a few bunches, to clobber some kind of a display together, and for the funeral home at least. I threw in a few bits for making sandwiches and, a few bottles of whiskey for the callers to the house, that kind of thing. And the nice lady at the checkout scanned them through first. Beep, beep, beep. She paused when she got to the bunches of flowers. Oh, she says, smiling at me. Oh, some fella's very lucky to be getting all of these for Valentine's Day. Not wanting to upset the nice lady, I swallowed the lump in my throat. I blinked back the tears and just said, "Oh, yeah, he is. Yeah. The till was making a funny noise, and the nice lady was looking perplexed. She had a bunch of flowers in her hand and said, "Well, that's funny. They were scanning through this morning, no problem." She tried another bunch of flowers. She smoothed out the barcode and scanned again. She typed the number into the till. "Leave them," I said. "Leave them." "Oh, well, it's no bother. I could call the manager." "No, don't bother. Just leave them." The next afternoon, laid out in her good green suit and her cream blouse, with the brooch that my grandfather gave her on their wedding day pinned to the lapel, and one single white rose clasped between her fingers, she looked exactly as she would have wanted. Neat, stylish, but not done up like she was off to a dance. And as the undertaker readied the funeral and told us to say our final farewells, I leaned in and I gave her the only kiss I'd ever given her in my whole life, and I whispered, "You were right about the flowers. The rose looks great. Head on now and tell them all I was asking for them."
For months, we watched the men, knee-deep in water, digging holes for the ESB poles. Not everyone agreed to let them dig on their land, and rows often broke out over where the poles would be situated. Most people were suspicious about the power, as they called it, coming into their homes. Bridget, the priest's housekeeper, said she would not touch the light switch with her hand. So Father O'Malley came up with a bright idea for her to use the handle of the brush to turn the light on and off. All our houses had to be wired before the big switch on, and we watched with great excitement as holes were drilled in walls and wires dangled from ceilings. Clouds of dust rose up as the walls were being disturbed for the first time since our house was built years before. Mam was busy sweeping all day trying to keep the dust at bay, and she wondered if it would be worth it. But her sister, who was a nurse in England, told her to have patience and put up with the dust, as she would not know herself when she had light at the flick of a switch and, best of all, a radio at the turn of a knob. We never had a radio before. The only time we heard one was at our grandmother's house when everyone in the village would gather round to listen to the All-Ireland final. Every day we walked home from school, we watched the ESB men hoist the giant poles into the sky. God, they completely changed the landscape forever. Even the cattle in the field seemed to be fascinated by them, but they soon discovered that they made great scratching posts. When all the poles were in place, they started to string the heavy wire from one to the next. It was like a giant necklace blowing in the wind. The wire came wound around the large timber wheels, just like the spools of thread Mam used to do her sewing with. How that was going to create light, we had no idea. One joker in the village told us it would happen when lightning made contact with the wire, and as I hated lightning, I became very wary of this. Soon all the fieldwork was done, and the poles stood proud and tall, waiting like us for the big day. A man from the radio shop went from door to door selling radios. My mam settled on a Bush model, a marvel of polished wood and shiny knobs. It had the names of all the stations we could get behind a little window. At the turn of a knob, you could move the marker back and forth to select the station you wanted to listen to. A special shelf with brackets underneath was put up on our kitchen wall, out of the way of little fingers. And the man warned us not to climb up and move the dial, as the radio shopman had fixed it at the Athlone station, all ready to spring into life when the switch happened. When the big day arrived, we could hardly conceal our excitement at the thought of what was about to happen. Oil lamps was filled for the last time, and Mam scrubbed the house from top to bottom, because she said the new light would show up all the cobwebs in the corners. Families of spiders who had lived there for years had to scurry for their lives as she wielded the feather duster. A switch-on party for the adults was arranged in our local hall, and we had to stay at home with our big brother in charge. We were warned once again not to touch anything, as the switches were ready for the lights and the radio was set for the Athlone station. Our parents got dressed up for the big occasion, and with a few final warnings to do as our brother told us, they set off for the local Pembroke Hall for the big switch-on. We could hardly contain our excitement as we waited for the light to appear, and better still, for the radio to burst into song. Then it happened. Suddenly our kitchen was filled with the brightest light we ever saw. But wait a minute. Where was the music we had waited so long for? All we could hear was a solemn voice in a solemn language that we did not understand, coming from our radio high up on our kitchen wall. Someone's little fingers had moved the dial, and instead of getting Athlone, our radio was tuned into the Vatican City. So we spent the night listening to Italian voices coming over the wires to our house in the west of Ireland, as we were too afraid to touch the dial in case we broke the radio.